It was nearly Christmas time. Annie and Clarabelle were packed full of people and parcels. Thomas was having very hard work. Come on, come on! Thomas looked at the hill ahead. Can I do it? Can I do it? He puffed anxiously. Suddenly, he saw a handkerchief waving from a cottage window. He felt better at once. Yes, I can! Yes, I can! He puffed bravely. He pulled his hardest and was zooming through the tunnel and resting in the station. That was Mrs. Kindly who waved to you, Thomas. She has to stay in bed all day. Poor lady. I'm sorry for her. Engines have heavy loads at Christmas time, but Thomas and Toby didn't mind the hard work when they saw Mrs. Kindly waving. But then it began to rain. It rained for days and days. Thomas didn't like it, nor did his driver. Off we go, Thomas. Pull hard and get home quickly. Mrs. Kindly won't wave today, he would say. But whether she waved or not, he always whistled when they passed the little lonely cottage. Its white walls stood out against the dark background of the hills.
Hello?
Exclaimed Thomas's fireman one day.
Look at that!
The driver came across the cab. Something's wrong there, he said. Hanging, flapping, and bed-drinkled from the window of the cottage was something that looked like a large red flag. Mrs. Kindly needs help, I expect, said the driver and put on the brakes. Thomas gently stopped. The guard came squelching through the rain up to Thomas's cab, and the driver pointed to the flag. See if a doctor's on the train, and ask him to go to the cottage, then walk back to the station and tell him we've stopped. The fireman went to see if the line was cleared in front. 2 passengers left the train and climbed to the cottage. Then the fireman returned. We'll back down to the station so that Thomas can get a good start.
We shan't get up the hill. Come and see what's happened.
They walked along the line and around the bend. Jiminy Christmas! Go back to the train. I'm heading to the cottage. He found the doctor with Mrs. Kindly.
Silly of me to faint. You saw the red dressing gown. You're all safe.
Yes, I've come to thank you. There was a landslide in the cutting, Doctor. Mrs. Kindly saw it from her window and stopped us. She saved our lives.
God bless you, ma'am.
The driver tiptoed from the room. They cleared the line by Christmas Day, and the sun shone as a special train puffed up from the junction. First came Thomas, then Toby with Annie and Clarabelle, and last of all, but very pleased at being allowed to come, was Henrietta. The Fat Controller was there, and lots of other people wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Kindly. Happy Christmas! Whistled the engines as they reached the place. The people got out and climbed to the cottage. Thomas and Toby wished they could go too. Mrs. Kindly's husband met them at the door. The Fat Controller, Thomas's driver, fireman, and guard went upstairs, while the others stood in the sunshine below the window. The driver gave her a new dressing gown to replace the one spoiled by the rain. The guard brought her some grapes, and the fireman gave her some woolly slippers and promised to bring some coal as a present from Thomas next time they passed. Mrs. Kindly was very pleased with her presents.
You are very good to me.
The passengers and I hope you will accept these tickets for the South Coast, Mrs. Kindly, and get really well in the sunshine. We cannot thank you enough for preventing that accident. I hope we have not tired you. Goodbye and Happy Christmas.
Then going quietly downstairs, they joined the group outside the window and sang some carols before returning to the train. Mrs. Kindly is now in Bournemouth, getting better every day, and Thomas and Toby are looking forward to the time when they can welcome her home. Excitement was in the air on Thomas's branch line. Thomas and Toby could be seen talking excitedly. Percy was baffled.
Why is everyone so excited?
Haven't you heard? Mrs. Kindly's coming home.
Who?
Oh, right. You never met her. Well, you see, Mrs. Kindly was a nice lady. She was quite ill and often lay sick in bed. But a few days before Christmas, there was a landslide. She warned Thomas' morning train about the impending collision. She saved many lives that day. Sir Topham Hatt sent her to the seaside to get better, and now she's coming home.
Now Percy was excited. He became swanky and was hard to handle.
Sober up, wouldn't you?
His driver would say, but Percy continued on. He would have his driver polish him every evening.
Please, just once more. I want to make a good impression when Mrs. Kindly comes.
If we wash you one more time, you'll probably shrink.
A few days before her arrival, Thomas had taken ill. He returned to work the next day.
Well, well, Thomas, you should take a trip to the sea.
What do you mean?
If it works wonders for Mrs. Kindly, it could work wonders for you.
Rubbish!
But just think about laying on that warm sand, the waves gently moving, the seagulls squawking.
Pooh! Sand's nothing but snow in the summer. It only causes trouble.
Nonsense! If the seaside made Mrs. Kindly better, then sand can only be a blessing than a curse.
Percy trundled away, staying firm on his belief. At last, it was the day of Mrs. Kindly's return. There was a large congregation waiting at Elsbridge. Thomas yawned. There was so much excitement the night before, he had hardly slept all night. There was a special train waiting, consisting of Thomas, Toby, Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta. They waited and waited, till at last someone shouted.
Here they come.
The engines whistled, and Toby rang his bell as Gordon puffed in with a special coach. Mrs. Kindly climbed out and was met with many cheers and whistles. Welcome home!
It's good to have you back.
Mrs. Kindly was moved to tears.
It is good to see you all again.
Sir Topham Hatt gave a speech, and before long, Mrs. Kindly boarded her train home. The engines puffed proudly with the coaches singing behind, leaving a rather cross Percy.
She didn't even look at me. She didn't even notice me.
And all my elbow grease was wasted.
But Percy couldn't be cross long. A couple weeks later, after Mrs. Kindly had settled in, she wanted to take a trip down to the sea. Sir Tom Hatt scheduled a special train just for the occasion. Percy was glad when he was chosen to take the train. When Mrs. Kindly boarded the train, she looked at Percy and gave a smile.
What a sweet little engine.
Percy smiled when he heard that. Percy was anxious to make a good impression. He sizzled with excitement. At last, the guard blew his whistle and Percy set it off. Percy run well, and everything went smoothly, but there was worse to come. Just outside the station throat, some boys were standing close to the track. They had a bucket filled with sand. As Percy puffed by, they threw the sand in the air, landing on Percy's face.
Ow! I can't see! I can't see!
Percy was so scared that he applied his brakes early. His driver tried to release them, but Percy put them back on. The noise was terrible. A little girl was so scared that she lost her candy floss, and it landed on Percy's nose. At last, the driver brought Percy to a stop.
My eyes! Someone please help me!
1 minute, Percy felt sandy. The next, he felt wet. Percy's eyes were blurry. When he could see, he saw Mrs. Kindly holding a canteen.
Oh no, that's it. Mrs. Kindly will never like me now.
One thing I looked forward to coming home was meeting you. I read about you in the books, and I knew I'd have a story to tell riding with you. Thank you so much for a lovely day.
She smiled, then walked away. Percy was still embarrassed, but felt better at Christmas when they threw a party for Mrs. Kindly, and she announced that Percy was her friend too. When Percy returned to the shed, Thomas couldn't help but laugh. Well, 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 Percy. Do you think Santa's still a blessing?
No, Santa's nothing but a nuisance. I don't see how it could have made Mrs. Kindly feel better. It's smart.
It's 'cause it's the sea air that does the trick, not the sand. There's no reason to be salty about it. Percy thought Thomas was being very silly indeed. As for the boys, they said they were sorry and promised never to do anything silly like that again. For punishment, they had to clean Percy, much to Percy's driver's arm's thanks. I think the boys got off better than they deserve. Don't you? One night, Henry simmered impatiently for Duck and Salty to shunt the flying kipper.
Hurry up! Hurry up! I don't have all night!
Keep your steaming. Aye, matey. We just have to wait for Arthur to bring some fish down from the fishing village. What's your problem?
I don't trust that new engine.
Salty, I will admit, he is a different engine, but he is hardworking and keeps the trucks in line.
I still don't trust him. Pirates have been known for terrorizing the sea. Who's to say he won't terrorize us?
What are you afraid of, Henry? That he'll make you walk the plank?
I wouldn't put it past him. Diesels are enough trouble on their own, but a diesel pirate is sure to be double the trouble.
Honestly, Henry, you need to see an engine for who they are, and not on the fuel they burn.
Soon it was time for Henry to leave, but Arthur still hadn't arrived.
Where is Arthur? He's never late.
Just then, Arthur arrived. Sorry I'm late. There was an accident on the line. I had to wait for it to be cleared.
Never mind that. We must get your cart attached to Henry's train before he pops a piston.
At last, the flying kipper was ready, and Henry steamed off into the night. journey was going well. He was just passing through a tunnel when he came to a complete stop. Henry was puzzled.
Why have we stopped?
You silly great engine! You were so impatient that we forgot to fill up on water. Now we're stuck here.
Bother! The other engines won't let me live this down. Me, making such a rookie mistake.
Henry has run out of water in the tunnel. I need one of you engines to push him to Vickerstown. Another engine will finish the journey from there. Any volunteers?
Beg your pardon, but the last time I was Henry's back engine, I smashed the rear van.
Aye, reminds me of the time I smashed that spiteful brake van, replied Douglas, who had just arrived with the late-night goods.
I'll go, sir. It'll be nice to stretch my wheels.
Right then, off you go.
Setting course for the tunnel.
So Salty set off into the night. He soon arrived at the tunnel.
So, me hearty, ran out of water?
Yes, and I don't need you poking fun about it.
I'm not poking fun, matey, but you haven't been very patient. That's what got you in this mess.
Salty buffered up to the brake van and began to push, but the trucks didn't budge.
Come on, you silly trucks.
No, we don't want to go.
We like it here.
Wouldn't you agree, Henry? You're the tunnel expert.
Oh, give it up. They won't move.
It just takes a bit of patience. A yo-ho-ho and a bucket of prawns. Until it spins.
Sang the trucks, and slowly the train began to move. Henry was surprised.
However did you get them to behave?
It's me secret. It takes just a little patience. That's all.
Henry decided that if Salty a Diesel could be patient with trucks, then a big engine like him should surely do the same. One morning, Sir Tom Hatt came to see Oliver.
Driver says you're in need of a change. How would you like to take a train of ballast to Barrow tonight?
Oh, yes, please, sir. Will I be gone long?
Just for today.
And with that, Sir Topham Hatt walked away.
Oh, Oliver, what a special job.
Do be careful, Oliver. We escaped from there once.
I'll be just fine, you two. Besides, I'm a match now for any diesel.
Yes, but you can't go ripping them in half.
I'll bust them into a turntable well.
But Oliver was still unfazed. Don't worry, I'll be there and back in no time. That evening, Oliver was taking on water. His train was waiting for him in a siding. Toad the brake van was also close by.
I do wish you the best of travels, Miss Oliver, but do be careful, though. Barrow can be quite the scary place in the dark.
Honestly, Toad, there's nothing to worry about. After all, I do have sagacity.
Quite right, Mr. Oliver.
Oliver trundled down the line with his train in tow. At first, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, but then the sky suddenly turned pitch black, and the moon couldn't shine as it was consumed in a cloud of darkness. Oliver arrived at Barrow. Diesels oiled about. Excuse me?
What you want?
Where would you like this train here?
In that siding over there. I have no use for it.
So Oliver did as he was told. As he was shunting the trucks in the siding, he realized, this is the same shed Douglas found me in. Once Oliver finished shunting his train, he began to get ready to head home. When the night foreman came and told Oliver's crew there was some paperwork that needed to be filled out. No worries, Oliver. We'll be back soon. But they weren't. Hours passed, and his crew hadn't returned. The dark atmosphere was unsettling. Oliver could hear the horns of diesels far away, and the sounds of metal being cut up. Oliver didn't feel brave anymore. He was scared. He was all alone, but not for long. 2 diesels emerged from the shadows.
Well, well, well.
Got you this time, Oliver.
You'll make very fine scrap indeed.
Back for him.
Get your buffers off me!
Quiet! There's no one to help you now.
The 2 diesels took him to a large smelting shed.
Bye-bye, Oliver.
Oliver looked up. Above him was a large grabber. This engine's not for scrapping! The grabber began to move. It was just about to grab hold of Oliver when it stopped. There stood Sir Topham Hatt.
It's a good thing I'm visiting this yard tonight. Toad was right to worry when you hadn't returned. Saving you from scrap is becoming a habit, Oliver. Please stop it.
Yes, sir. But I have learned one thing.
And what is that?
There's no place like home.
And that's exactly where you're going now.
It was a quiet trip back home, until Douglas spoke up. You know, you got a good friend in young Toad. It was he that raised the alarm. Really, Toad?
It was nothing, Mr. Oliver. You saved me when you took me along with Miss Isabel, and I was just simply returning the favor.
Thank you, Toad.
I will always have your back, Mr. Oliver, both literally and figuratively.
He and Toad make the finest pair. Oliver knew Douglas was right. When the 3 arrived back on the island of Sodor, it was too late to head home to the sheds on the Little Western, so they spent the night in Tidmouth. As the 3 went to sleep, Oliver looked around and smiled. He was surrounded by friends that cared for him. He was home and safe. He closed his eyes happily knowing all was well. It was an unusually warm day for the time of year on the island of Sodor. As Thomas pulled a goods train down his branch line, it grew hotter and hotter. The sun baked the metal rails, so Thomas hurried over them. As he steamed uphill, he huffed and puffed wearily.
Oh, this is thirsty work.
At the next station, he pulled up beside the water tower.
Phew, I'm boiling. I need a nice long drink.
Then Bertie the bus arrived nearby. While Bertie waited at the bus stop close to the water tower, he saw Thomas was looking hot and bothered.
Hey, mind you don't burst the boiler.
He teased.
I'm glad I don't have to pull heavy trucks and run on hot rails, and all that coal you carry must slow you down.
Thomas was cross.
Pah! Engines are more efficient than buses, whatever the weather.
After his drink, he felt much cooler and traveled on his way.
Goodbye, Bertie. You won't see me for smoke.
Bertie was not carrying passengers anymore because he was due back at the depot.
I'll show Thomas that buses are best.
Bertie said. He raced along the road by the railway track. Meanwhile, Thomas spotted trouble ahead. His driver put the brake on.
The sun has made the rails bend.
Thomas had to go over it very slowly indeed. Next moment, Bertie sped by.
I'm glad I'm not an engine. Roads don't buckle.
At the next station, Thomas's driver told the station master about the damaged rail. When Thomas returned to the main station yard, the station master had phoned ahead to the Fat Controller. Soon Thomas was sent back up the line with some engineers to replace the rail. On the way, Thomas stopped and waited for a signal to change. He saw Bertie stuck in a traffic jam. Clouds of steam were gushing from Bertie's radiator. His driver had gone to fetch more water for it. Now Bertie wished he hadn't teased Thomas.
I'm overheated. Once I've had a cold drink, I'll be fine.
Thomas grinned. I've never seen a steam bus before, he chuckled. It was evening. Edward had had a busy day, and as he stopped at the last station before the junction, he was looking forward to getting home. Get in quickly, please, he whistled to the passengers. The passengers got in quickly, and Edward's driver pulled the lever, but he found that he couldn't move. The driver checked Edward's brakes, but nothing seemed to be wrong. He scratched his head.
Whatever can be the matter?
He wondered. He gave Edward more steam. This time, Edward started, but went only a little way before he stopped with a groan.
It's no good,
the driver said to the fireman.
Something is holding us back. Go see if the guard can help, please.
The fireman jumped down to the platform and ran along to the guard's van.
What's up?
Reckon the brakes have seized on. Is yours off all right?
Should be,
replied the guard, and he tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't move. The fireman helped, but they still couldn't turn it, So they called the driver, but it made no difference. The brake handle had stuck fast.
We shall miss Henry's connection at the junction if we can't start soon,
said the driver.
Let's give Edward everything he's got and hope for the best. It'll be hard work,
he told Edward.
But I'm sure you'll do your best.
Rather doubtfully, Edward agreed. Come on, come on, come on, he puffed fiercely. Smoke and steam poured from his funnel, and slowly the train moved after him. Once they were moving, things became easier, but Edward found that he couldn't go fast, however hard he tried. Oh dear, I'm sure it's in this train. Then suddenly, there was a jerk, and everything was easy. They reached the junction quickly, and while the passengers changed to Henry's train, Edward's fireman went to find out what had been wrong with the guard's brake.
One tiny nut,
he told them when he came back.
It broke and jammed itself against the brake, so we couldn't turn the handle. Then, after we started, the brake itself broke, so we could move properly.
The driver laughed.
Come on, Edward. Let's get that guard's van into a siding where it can be mended.
Who would have thought that one small nut could cause so much trouble? Bulgy had been refurbished and was delivering passengers again. The farmer, who owned the chicken field Bulgy used to stay in, was flustered. With Bulgy back on the road, his chickens had no place to sleep.
My chickens loved Bulgy. They're quite partial to hen houses that were once used for transport,
he told Farmer Cole one day. Sounds like you need a new bus, or better yet, a coach. Last winter, Toby's coach housed my newborn baby lambs. This left the farmer deep in thought. Henrietta is Toby's faithful coach. She first came to the island with Toby when their old line closed down. The station master wanted to turn Henrietta into a hen house, but that would never do. Henrietta had never given being a hen house a second thought. So this made her very surprised when Toby brought startling news.
Driver says there's a farmer that wants to buy you and turn you into a hen house.
Don't worry, Toby. Sir Topper Hat will never approve.
I know, but...
But what?
The chickens do need a place to call home.
I would rather carry passengers than be a livestock car.
Toby knew Henrietta was right, but he still wanted to help the hens. A few weeks later, Toby was sent to Kronk's scrapyard.
Maybe there's something here,
his driver said reassuringly. Toby looked around, hoping to find something that would be a suitable hen house. Suddenly, Toby cried out.
That's it!
Toby saw a decaying van lying in a pile of scrap.
Good eye, Toby. That van is just a ticket. I'll speak to the manager.
So Toby's driver talked to the manager, who spoke to Sir Topham Hatt, who made the arrangements. And a few weeks later, Butch arrived with a van to Bulgy's field. It was then set in place, and the chickens wasted no time in making themselves at home. When Henrietta heard about the new hen house, she laughed.
Everything has its proper place, whether that be on the road, rail, or field.
Toby couldn't agree more. Harold the helicopter is pride of the sky. He rescues anyone who's in trouble. He thinks there is no other hero than him. This makes him boastful. Harvey the crane engine is also a hero. He rescues engines that are in trouble with the help of his crane. One day, Harvey was rebuilding some derailed trucks. Harold was resting close to the line.
There, job done.
Well done, Harvey.
I'd hardly get excited at trucks being put on track. Any fool can do that.
Not anyone can do Harvey's job. It's difficult to put trucks back onto the line.
Percy was used to Harold's pompous attitude, but Harold still didn't believe Harvey's job was difficult.
Excuse me, but I must be off. Doing my job, that takes real skill.
And he buzzed away.
Stuck-up Roybird thing. Never mind, Harvey. Your job does take skill. He'll see.
Harvey wished he didn't always have to prove himself. Harold was at the fishing village. He was taking an injured fisherman to hospital. Above him, Douglas was shunting a train of oil tankers. Careful, Douglas. That rail looks loose.
I know what I'm doing.
Luckily, no one was hurt, but the tankers were now dangling dangerously above Harold. His pilot examined the tankers closely.
It's too dangerous for us to take off. The wind from your propellers could dislodge the trucks, making them fall down on us.
Harold was upset, but there was nothing he could do. He was grounded. Luckily, Douglas was able to take the injured fisherman to hospital. Harvey soon arrived to clear the mess. He looked at the tankers. They were at odd angles.
It'll be difficult to clean this.
Harvey began to clear the mess. Soon, he came to a tanker that was dangling directly above Harold. There was another tanker resting on top of it. It was the only way to keeping the tanker from falling.
Please be careful,
a fisherman cried.
If that tanker falls, the oil will seep into the ocean and harm the fish.
And me!
Fumed Harold. Harvey was nervous, but still stayed calm as he observed the jumbled mess. If he moved the tanker on top first, then the one on the bottom would fall on Harold. But if he moved the one on the bottom, then the one on top would burst open, pouring into the sea. But Harvey knew what to do.
Anchor the bottom tanker down,
he called. So the workmen did. Once everything was ready, Harvey began to lift the top tanker. Everyone was suddenly still and watched anxiously as the tanker was being lifted. The bottom tanker began to tilt, but it didn't fall. Harvey's plan had worked.
That was real skill.
Fine piece of work,
cried some workmen. Soon, both tankers had been moved safely out of the way. Harold wasted no time and took off into the sky, but not without saying,
Couldn't have done it better myself.
Harvey smiled. Coming from Harold, that was high praise indeed. Murdoch was collecting a goods train from the docks. A careless crane operator wasn't paying attention to his load. He swung it too low, right into Murdoch's cab.
That was loud.
Luckily, no one was hurt. Murdoch's crew looked him all over, but found nothing wrong. No harm done. A few minutes later, the big engine steamed into action. He whistled long and proud, but it didn't sound like his whistle. Everyone at the docks covered their ears as Murdoch came to a stop. His driver looked at his whistle again. Your whistle's been knocked out of place, making it wonky. It's too late to fix it now. We're late already.
But it's not safe for an engine to go without a whistle.
But, added his driver, you can still blow yours. It'll be safe until we can mend it. The purpose of a whistle is to let others know an engine is coming. Everyone certainly knew Murdoch was coming. The noise from his whistle was awful.
Lorries skidded. Animals scattered, engines were caught unaware, and pedestrians covered their ears as Murdoch passed. Murdoch wished he could be more quiet, but it was no use as he passed another whistle board. Once Murdoch arrived at the big station, he uncoupled from his train and puffed silently away. He didn't want to stop and chat. He simply wanted some peace and quiet as he rolled into the shed. Sometime later, Thomas arrived. He was gurgling and boiling with laughter. What's so funny?
Oh! Shortly after you left the station, a constable arrived and asked for Topham Hatt who had the ear-splitting whistle. When he found out, he wrote regular disturbance of the peace in his notebook.
To think, Murdoch turned criminal,
said James, who had just arrived. Do you like chaos and noise now, Murdoch?
Certainly not, Thomas. Our Murdoch would never disturb the peace. He loves peace and quiet.
What do you have to say, Murdoch? Murdoch said nothing. He knew he had the right to remain silent, because anything he said would be held against him by the other engines. Spencer the private engine had returned to Sodor with the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. The other engines were happy by the visit, but not by Spencer.
What are you doing here?
Nice to see you too, Gordon.
but a simple hello will do. I brought the Duke and Duchess of Boxford for a special meeting with the mayor.
I'm surprised you're in steam. Did you remember the water? Or did you forget the coal?
I'll have you know there'll be no mistakes. But there seems to be one already.
What?
They put a slow engine like you on the express.
The engines weren't the only one with an unwanted guest. Sir Topham Hatt was having trouble of his own, not with the railway, but at home. An inspector had found ants in the Hat's home, leaving it unlivable.
That's why the Duke and Duchess of Boxford have kindly lended Spencer to take my wife to the mainland.
Forgive me asking, sir, but why?
Well, to put it plainly, she said either they go or she goes. She is going to visit my mother until the bugs have gone.
It'll be my pleasure to escort her, sir.
Spencer was pleased with his special. The next morning, Spencer was simmering nicely as Lady Hat climbed on board. Percy was pulling some trucks into the yard. He was just passing over the switches when one of his trucks collapsed unexpectedly. Spencer was surprised. A workman rushed over to inspect.
Just as I suspected, termites.
Look what you did. It's always little bugs like you that get in my way.
I'd watch your tongue if I was you. Calling Percy a bug is a mistake.
And it was the termites' fault, not mine.
Oh, please. A little bug causing trouble for a big, strong engine like me? Now stop chatting and get these trucks out of my way.
The cleanup process took a long time. Spencer began to grow impatient. But at last, the mess was cleared and Spencer was off. Spencer raced on the main line. He was still cross about earlier, but he couldn't stay mad for long. It was a lovely day. The sun was shining, and the green field looked lovely as they turned to a faint blur. The journey was going well until Spencer arrived at a signal that was set to danger.
Bother! Why are we having to stop? We're a special train!
No one knew why they had stopped.
No worries,
said his driver.
I'm sure we'll be on our way soon.
So they waited and waited, but the signal never changed.
This is ridiculous.
So Spencer began to move forward, but his driver put his brakes on hard.
Don't be silly. It's dangerous to go past a red signal. Every engine knows that.
Spencer was cross, and so was Lady Hat. They continued to wait, but the signal stayed red. Other engines passed and took no notice.
I have never waited at a signal this long in all my life.
His crew were also growing concerned, so the fireman went back to the last signal box. He wasn't gone long when there was a terrible commotion.
Spencer, what are you doing sitting on the main line?
If you haven't noticed, my signal is red and will be that way forever.
Nonsense. Signals don't stay red forever.
But it did, and soon the express was over 20 minutes late. When Sir Topham Hatt found out, he was most concerned. He arrived on Percy, who also brought workmen.
Dear, oh dear, Spencer, you've missed your path.
Sorry, sir.
But what I can't understand is why that signal hasn't changed. We had an inspection a week ago.
I think I can shed some light, sir. We found an ant in the signal, and it chewed through the wires and got in the way of the receiver.
Sir Topham Hatt gurgled with laughter as he turned to his wife.
Well, my dear, it seems that this day has been bugging you.
Lady Hat snorted and closed her carriage window with a slam.
Well, well, well. Did a little bug cause some trouble for a big, strong engine?
No, not at all, Percy. Spencer's never bothered by a bug.
Yes, but it seems you've had a bug get in your way, Gordon.
Yes, a rather large silver bug. First forgetting water, and now an ant. What little thing will you be bothered by next?
Spencer blushed and looked at his buffers. Soon Spencer was able to proceed. He slunk slowly away with a newfound respect for bugs, come ants or termites. Thomas was deeply hurt after the time he went fishing. You'd often hear him warning the other engines never to go fishing. "It's too uncomfortable," he'd say, but the other engines all had the same answer.
"We know not to do something as daft as that."
Thomas was infuriated that the other engines all laughed at his warnings. All the engines on Sodor knew the story of the time Thomas went fishing. All except Arthur. Arthur was the newest engine on Sodor, who was recently given the Normandy branch line. One day, Thomas was telling his story to Arthur. "I began to reach steam fit to burst. Some fish had gotten in my tanks. My crew had to fish them out. I was miserable." "That's quite the story, Thomas. But I think fish are lovely." "Fish are nothing like that at all. They're heavy, smelly, and cause nothing but problems. You need to be careful." Arthur laughed and puffed away. Thomas was cross, and he snarled his nose. "No need to get your nose out of joint," said his driver. Thomas was puzzled. There is a lone water tower at the fishing village. It has a pump that is fed into a nearby stream. When the water tower is empty, a workman turns the tap and the water from the stream refills the tower. This process can often take hours. A new workman didn't know this. His foreman told him to refill the tower when it was emptied, but the workman forgot and went to lunch. When he returned, he found the water tower bone dry. He quickly turned the tap, but the water came drowsily in.
This is taking too long. If it's not filled, I'll get in trouble.
The workman found a bucket and some rope and began to draw water from the sea. Once he had the bucket full, he clambered up and poured the water into the tower. He repeated this process over a dozen times. At last, the water tower was filled, and the workman went away. Later, Arthur arrived to collect a train of fish. He needed to refill his tanks. His driver connected him to the hose pipe and turned the tap. As he did, there was a great plop. What was that?
It's only the water draining into your tank.
But it sounded like something fell in.
Don't be daft. It's only water.
Meanwhile, Thomas was busy shunned trucks in the yard, but Thomas was in a bad mood.
What's wrong?
Driver says my nose is out of joint.
Did you bump into a truck too hard?
No. Driver says it means to make a fuss over nothing.
Nose out of joint. What a funny saying.
Driver said after Arthur laughed when I told him the time I went fishing.
Well, it is kind of a funny story.
Well, it wasn't funny for me. It was an unpleasant experience. Just then, the yard manager arrived.
Thomas, you need to collect the breakdown train and take it to the junction.
Why?
Apparently Arthur is having trouble with the fish.
Thomas was confused. Arthur's quite good with fish trucks. I wonder what's wrong. Thomas was surprised when he found Arthur in the middle of the line, covered in fish. Goodness me, what a pong! Arthur was embarrassed. The journey was going well when my steam pressure rose so suddenly. It startled my driver and he put the brake on too quickly. Fish fell all over me. I wonder what caused your steam pressure to go up. Arthur looked at his buffers. Thomas knew then. Arthur? Do you have fish in your tanks? Yes. I should have heeded your warning. Thomas laughed. Oh, not to worry, Arthur. Now we both have fishy tales to tell. This made Arthur feel just a bit better. Sir Tom Hatt found out the workman and had a stern word with him. As for Arthur, it took a long time for him to be repaired. The fish didn't want to leave Arthur's warm tanks. When Arthur returned to work, he smelt of fish for weeks. Arthur doesn't think fish are wonderful now, and is most cautious when he refills. One morning, as James waited at the big station, the Fat Controller came to see him.
I hope you can give us a good run this morning, James. I have an important meeting to go to and I don't want to be late. Do your best, won't you?
Of course, sir. We'll have you there in no time.
Well done. I know I can rely on you.
On every passenger train, there is something called an emergency cord. If there is an emergency, it can be used to call the guard, and it automatically stops the train at the same time. But it only must be used in an emergency. Otherwise, the person that pulled it may have to pay a fine. On James's train today, there was a party of foreign holidaymakers. They couldn't understand English very well, and thought that the chain above the door was for calling the buffet car attendant. So they pulled it. Suddenly the brakes came on, and James had to stop as quickly as he could. "Oh no!" he groaned as he came to a standstill.
Now what?
Emergency, James,
said his driver, looking back.
Someone has pulled the emergency communication cord.
The guard walked along the train to find out what was wrong. The foreign visitors were pleased to see him, but the guard was not pleased when they asked him for 4 cups of coffee. The matter was soon cleared up, and the guard told James he could go. But when he tried to start, he found that he couldn't. The sudden action of the brakes had locked them solid, and James couldn't move an inch. What was worse, the train had stopped right across the level crossing, and by now there was long queues of cars on both sides, waiting to get over the railway. James was overcome with embarrassment, but he couldn't do anything about it. The Fat Controller came, and the motorists all told him what a nuisance the railway was.
I'm sorry, sir.
Not your fault, James. But I don't know how I'm going to reach my meeting.
James didn't either. Then, a flash of color on the traffic queue caught his eye.
Is that Birdie waiting? Maybe he could turn round and...
In a flash, James's fireman was running down the road. A few minutes later, he came back, grinning broadly. "No problem, sir," he said to the Fat Controller. "He's trying to reach the same place as you. He says he'll be happy to take you when he's turned." It was another hour before our fitter came to mend the brakes, and longer still before James could get his train moving. He was very sorry, and so were the foreign visitors, but they promised not to make the same mistake again. James felt certain they wouldn't. Each summer on the island of Sodor, a special picnic train rides were organized for visitors to the island. The Fat Controller was busy working out which engine would be free to take the picnic train. At the engine shed that morning, the engines waited patiently for the Fat Controller to tell them which engine had been chosen. "I do hope it's me," said Thomas to Percy. "Annie and Clara will have so much fun showing the visitors all the splendid countryside." The Fat Controller arrived.
I have decided that Gordon will take the picnic train.
"Oh, Annie and Clarabelle will be disappointed," sighed Thomas sadly. As they had gotten older, Thomas's 2 loyal coaches did huff and puff a little, but did enjoy a good holiday outing now more than ever. Gordon did not look happy.
I am the biggest and fastest engine on the whole railway. I am far too important to take the picnic train. Engines on my railway must do as they are told. Now go and collect your coaches and take them to the harbor station where the visitors will be waiting.
The waiting passengers cheered and waved as Gordon drew into the platform.
I'll show them what a ride on the fastest engine on the whole railway is like,
Gordon muttered to himself. The guard blew the whistle, and they were off. Gordon started with such a jerk that the driver fell off balance and knocked the brake off. Gordon rushed off with a loud rage. Through the tunnel he raced, faster through the beautiful Sodor countryside. By the time the driver had managed to slow Gordon, they were halfway through their trip. The passengers were very angry indeed. When they pulled into the next station, they all got off and started complaining bitterly to the fat controller, who had just arrived at the station.
Gordon went so fast.
We couldn't see any of the countryside.
They complained. Please, sir, called Thomas, who had pulled in at the other platform. We can take the visitors to a more leisurely place.
Yes, indeed you can, Thomas.
All the passengers climbed aboard Annie and Clarabelle, and Thomas set off cheerfully. Whenever they passed along an especially beautiful part of the island, Thomas slowed down so everyone got a good view. All the visitors had a lovely ride, and they all went home very happy. That evening, Thomas returned wearily to the shed. Oh, what a super day that turned out to be! Gordon was still sulking. Gordon's Picnic Express may have been the fastest, but it certainly wasn't the best. Gordon pretended he hadn't heard. Thomas's branch line is home to many animals. Sometimes these animals can wander onto the tracks, which can cause a considerable amount of delay. One day, Thomas was puffing along the line. He saw Percy stop further up ahead. A fence was broken, and some cows had escaped and wandered across his line. Percy, you know the Fat Controller relies on us, don't you?
Yes, Thomas, of course.
How do you expect me to keep my branch line to time with you resting?
I'm not resting, it's the cows.
That's no excuse. Be a sensible engine and try to keep to time.
He's become rather puffed up, hasn't he?
Indeed, his branch line has gotten to his smoke box.
Thomas had become conceited. He arrogantly puffed down the line. Who does Percy think he is, always coming up with excuses? Thomas was too busy thinking about Percy that he lost all concentration and crashed into the back of Maeve's stone train. When Sir Topham Hatt heard the news, he was furious.
Thomas, I've heard over a dozen complaints of you being rude and bossing the other engines, and I believe your branch line is the cause. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
In that case, I'm relieving you of your branch line obligations. You will work in the yard till I can trust you again.
But sir, who will look after the branch line?
Percy will look after it, for I've also heard you've been treating him quite poorly as of late.
Thomas seethed with anger. Percy caused my accident, he thought. Why should he get my branch line? After Thomas returned from the works, he was very bitter as he worked in the yard. He muttered and complained and bumped the trucks harder than usual. Thomas's attitude was spreading a bad atmosphere in the yard, and Toby had become fed up.
Thomas, your attitude is rotten.
It's not fair. Percy caused my accident, and now he gets to gallivant off on my branch line just because he was lazy?
Some cows were on the line. You know as well as I do that cows can be silly things that won't do as they are told. Even with cow catchers, they can still be stubborn.
Well, you can't blame problems on cows.
Thomas, you're being hypocritical.
Hippowamble?
Hypocritical. It means to say one thing but do another.
What do you mean?
You say you can't blame your problems on cows. Though you blamed a cow for making you late when you were delivering Sir Topham Hatt's mother to Kirk Ronan.
Thomas felt ashamed. He knew Toby was right. I'm sorry, Toby. I letting my branch line get to my smoke box.
That's all right, but I believe there's another engine that needs your apology.
Thomas knew Toby was right again. Later, Thomas was delivering a train of coal to his branch line. He hoped to see Percy. He didn't know that some cows had strayed across the line. Thomas saw them and quickly applied his brakes. Just in time.
We shan't get any further. Not until these cows have moved.
Thomas's crew went for the farmer. As they did, Percy puffed past.
Come on, Thomas. This is no time for a rest. You need to keep on moving.
Thomas was embarrassed. At last, the line was clear.
Come along, Thomas. Let's try and make up for lost time.
But try as he might, he was late for every job he had for the rest of the day. It was very late by the time Thomas made it back to the shed. Percy was already there.
Well. Thomas, how do you expect me to keep the branch line to time with you darling on the line?
Thomas felt very ashamed. I'm sorry, Percy.
That's alright. Cows can be silly, just like a certain engine.
Thomas looked at his buffers.
But you must admit, it was a little amusing.
Next time, we shouldn't let something as silly as a cow get between us. Sir Topham Hatt soon gave Thomas back his branch line. Now Thomas has a much more sensible engine, and now is sure to move carefully down the line.
Come on, you silly trucks.
Percy was having a trying time. The trucks were giving him plenty of nonsense. Teased the trucks as Percy snorted up the hill.
Go at it, Percy. Don't let those silly trucks beat you.
Percy's cheeks turned red as his wheels spun and slipped and spun until he could go no further.
I'll call for help.
The trucks giggled with triumph. When engines are having trouble, sometimes a banker is called. A banker is an engine that helps push other engines when their loads are too heavy. Today, Murdoch was sent as a banker. He buffered up behind and pushed Percy.
Murdoch, you are a strong engine. Yes, I am very strong. Then tell me why you would push Percy up my hill.
Goodness, Gordon. I didn't know you wanted to give up your express and take a permanent career as a banker.
Big, strong, tender engines like us don't waste our talents pushing engines up hills, let alone tank engines. That's a small engine's job.
Oh, is that why I'm here? To push you up hills?
I don't need help going up hills. What's got him so steamed up?
He's just embarrassed to think about a bigger and stronger engine than him pushing up his own hill.
To think of an engine intimidated by me.
It was bank holiday season time again. That meant more passengers and extra coaches, especially for the express, making it much heavier. Gordon struggled to get his train over his hill, but he wouldn't let himself get stuck. He pulled and tugged with all of his strength, but the strain was taking its toll on the big blue engine. A few days later, Sir Topham Hatt had a special job for Gordon.
This has been one of the best bank holidays we've had. Gordon, I want you to deliver the profits in a special post train to the mainland. Yes, sir.
Soon Gordon was speeding down the line with his train in tow. He then arrived at his hill. As he began to ascend the slope, the heavy train began to tug on his coupling, threatening to hold him back.
No, you don't,
he said, and pulled even harder. Steady, Gordon, warned his driver, as Gordon vigorously continued on, but the strain on his coupling grew stronger.
I'll show them I don't need help up hills.
At last, Gordon reached the crest.
I knew I could do it.
No sooner was he coasting down the other side when there was a terrible noise, bringing Gordon to a standstill.
What happened?
You've broken down. Your heavy trains have just been too much for you.
Oh, the indignity.
Gordon's driver went for help. Gordon was upset. He knew Edward would be sent to help.
I'll never hear the end of this.
He was surprised when Murdoch arrived.
What are you doing here? Where's Edward?
He was called away. I was sent to help push.
Gordon was horrified.
But big engines can't push engines up hills. But I'm not pushing you up. I'm pushing you down.
Gordon's face hung lower than a signal as the embarrassed train set off. As they went down the line, other engines passed by, whistling and laughing. Gordon had never felt so disgraced.
You've had a trying day, Gordon. Once you've been repaired, you will have a much-needed rest. Thank you, sir.
Sir Topham Hatt then turned to Murdoch.
As for you, Murdoch, today you've proven to me how quick you are at taking the initiative. You are a credit to my railway.
Thank you, sir.
Hooray for Murdoch the banker! You have the railway's finances.
So, Gordon, can big engines be bankers now?
Gordon said nothing. He was too proud to admit it, but Murdoch could see all too well. When Gordon returned back to work, the other engines teased him, but there was no more talk about big engines as bankers. Gordon now knows he can bank on bankers, especially if that banker is Murdoch. Percy has had many accidents on the Northwestern Railway. One in particular involved a disagreeable barge named Bulstrode. After the incident, he was left on a beach so children could play on him all day. He didn't much care for it. One morning, Percy was passing by the beach where Bulstrode laid.
Poor barge.
Percy had never forgiven himself for the incident.
I wish there was something I could do to help. He doesn't deserve to be mourned on the beach. It was my fault.
Percy didn't realize his driver was listening. A few months later, Percy was at the docks. He had just entered the quay when he heard an unfamiliar voice.
Never turn your back on that engine, or you'll be in trouble before you can say I'm sinking.
Percy stopped and looked around.
Oh, hello,
Bulstrode.
Ah, yes. What are you doing back in the water?
To help work.
Sir?
Driver told me your feelings, and I believe Bulstrode has learned his lesson.
Aye, aye, Captain. We could always use more hands on deck. The docks keeps very busy.
Quite right, but I'll be keeping a close eye on you.
Yes, sir.
If you work hard, I will allow you to stay, but if not, the children will be happy to have their playground back.
Bulstrode shuddered at the thought. Bulstrode worked hard, but he still grumbled, though he kept it to a minimum. Cranky and Salty were very pleased with his help. It was soon 2 days before Christmas, and the docks were very busy. It's miserable loading and unloading in this numbing wind. I can't feel my hook.
Aye, it is getting a bit nippy.
Try being in the water. By the time I get to the mainland, I'll be an iceberg.
I've never seen it so cold.
It was getting colder, and the temperature was rapidly dropping, so fast that the railway was closed early due to the rails freezing over. All traffic was halted, engines were stopped at stations and yards, and that night, freezing rain pounded the island. The engines were miserable. In the morning, the engines were able to return to the sheds.
The rain has positively ruined my paintwork.
There are more pressing matters than paintwork, James. The cold weather has frozen the machinery at the power station. There have been reports of many power outages across the island.
That means many families will freeze.
That would be true, Henry, but there is a shipment of coal and generators from the mainland coming by sea this morning.
Thank goodness for that. It's Christmas Eve.
Driver says there's to be another freeze tonight. Precisely, you must deliver the supplies when it arrives. If not, it will be a very cold Christmas.
It's like delivering presents. Like Santa Claus.
Don't be silly, Percy. Santa doesn't deliver coal to all the good girls and boys.
Meanwhile, there was trouble.
Shiver me axles! The ocean be frozen over!
No ships can come in or out! And indeed, Cranky was right. Bulstrode was outside of the docks, loaded with the important supplies. One of his crew gazed upon the frozen sea.
The ice is too thick to sail through.
Oh no, I'm not spending Christmas out here in this miserable ocean.
Bulstrode charged forward, driving his bow into the ice. The heavy weight from his load broke the ice, splitting it into pieces. The ice split and cracked as Bulstrode charged through. It was a long and cold job.
This is nothing. This ice is weak compared to me.
Meanwhile, Percy had arrived at the docks with Sir Topham Hatt. They stared anxiously out to sea. The fat controller shook his head.
The ice is too thick. It's impossible for a ship to break through.
But what about the important supplies?
We'll just have to think of something else, Percy.
Cranky, have another look. What do you see?
All I see is sea. Wait a minute. I see something. It's Bulstrode!
Coming into port, cold, tired, but unbeaten, was Bulstrode.
Well done, Bulstrode. That kind of determination is just what we need at the docks.
Thank you, sir.
Well done, Bulstrode. You're a hero.
It's been long overdue. Welcome to the dockyard crew, me hearty.
The supplies were quickly unloaded. Donald delivered the generators to the power station, and Percy delivered the coal all across the island. And that night, every home on the island was as warm as toast. Bulstrode was at the docks. It was very quiet. It was Christmas Day, and the docks were closed. But to Bulstrode's surprise, Percy arrived.
What are you doing here?
You'll see.
Percy had brought some of the villagers that wanted to say thank you. They unloaded a small tree, presents, and threw a big party in Bulstrode's honor. It was a splendid time.
I hope this makes up for the past,
Percy said hopefully. Bulstrode said nothing. He wasn't the kind of barge to give a smile or a kind word. But Percy thought he could see a small grin creep on Bulstrode's face. It was nearly Christmas time, and James's spirits were bright. As the passengers walked to and fro on the platform, James spotted a man in the crowd. It was Jeremiah Joplin, the man who had given his bootlaces to fix a brake pipe. James whistled hello, but immediately regretted it. When Mr. Joplin's face turned bright red, he gave James quite the dirty look. James, quite taken aback, puffed quickly away. Hello, James. Have you heard the news?
What news?
Apparently there's an uproar at the big station.
What for?
Search me. From what I've heard, there's an individual who's upset with the railway. Later, James was collecting a small goods train. There was a terrible commotion on the platform. Jeremiah Joplin was standing on a pile of luggage and was telling everyone that
this is a bad railway, having to sit through choppy rides, being made public humiliations, and this railway allowing raging red hornets to pull our trains. I tell you, this railway is unreliable, a disgrace, even.
James was horrified. He was so embarrassed, he quickly puffed away, leaving his train at the platform. Sir Topham Hatt was not pleased and spoke sternly to James.
The passengers thought that your little stunt was hilarious. You did not set a good example for my railway.
But sir, he was harassing me.
It doesn't matter. You need to learn to ignore that man and not let his words get under your skin. Or, in this case, paintwork?
Yes, sir.
Now go and collect your train you left behind.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Joplin's resentment to the railway went on for days, allowing unrest. James returned to the shed one evening, feeling exhausted. You look tired.
Yes, tired of that man's mouth. He gives me ugly looks and bad names every time I come into the station. That man is hard-headed. Can't he see what he's doing is nonsense?
Well, from his perspective, he had an unpleasant ride, then asked to hand over something in his possession. When he refused, he was harassed.
So he has the right to be a nuisance?
He might have been treated poorly, but that's no excuse for poor behavior. Just then, the two engines overheard two workmen talking.
Did you hear that crazy man is going to show up an hour early to protest again tomorrow?
I hear Sir Topham Hatt is going to call the police and have him taken away.
Maybe it's for the best. That lunatic has caused enough of a disturbance.
Serves him right.
James!
It's true. That man deserves to be put in the slammer.
James, that's a terrible thought. Besides, Christmas is the time for goodwill to all men. Maybe a little act of kindness can set that man straight.
Do you really think so?
Christmas warms the coldest heart.
I gotta go.
Excuse me, Mr. Joplin?
What is it?
The driver emerged with a beautifully wrapped parcel in his arms. He handed it to Mr. Joplin. Go on, open it. The package revealed a pair of army boots with leather laces. Mr. Joplin stood there, speechless.
I'm sorry about your rough ride. I hope you accept my apology.
Thank you.
You did the right thing, James. Now give it time.
A couple days later, James was woken up excitedly by his driver.
Wake up, James. Look what Percy found on the post train last night. A package with a letter attached. It's addressed to you.
A letter? For me? What does it say?
Well, dear James,
I was deeply touched by your kind gift. I simply didn't have the words. I know now that you are truly a remarkable engine. I feel quite foolish for my actions, but if you can put yours in the past, then so can I. In this package are my old laces I received back after your train. It's not much. These laces only left me seething, but after your kindness, I don't receive those feelings anymore. I'm certain these laces will mean more to you than me. Best regards, Jeremiah Joplin.
James smiled. Nowadays, James doesn't see Mr. Joplin very often. But whenever they do, James gives him a friendly whistle, which is then responded with a wave. The old laces now hang in the shed, and every time James sees them, he is comforted by the night he made spirits bright. Lots of people have been traveling at Thomas's branch line. A magician was visiting the island and was putting on shows at Maithwaite. All the passengers and engines were amazed, but Percy was the most amazed of all.
The lady disappeared and pulled a rabbit out of his hat. And he even...
Settle down, Percy. There's no need to pop a piston.
A bunch of excitement over nothing. He dresses like Sir Topham Hatt, and the only thing he can make disappear is a meal.
James! But it's true. All it is a bunch of tricks. Magic isn't real. You could even ask Donald and Douglas. All with their very engine nonsense.
I wouldn't say that, Henry. I once delivered a magic carpet, and it kept flying away.
Don't be silly, Percy. That was a regular old carpet. It was just the wind.
You weren't there, Henry. The wind can't pick up a carpet and land it perfectly on a truck.
Gordon? You of all engines believe in magic?
You didn't see what I saw, Henry. Even Thomas saw the carpet. Didn't you, Thomas?
I didn't really see it. I was busy looking for Sir Topham Hatt's hat. But I'll say this. The wind was most peculiar that day.
What are you still doing here? James and Henry, you have goods trains waiting for you. Thomas, your branch line. Percy, a supplies train. And Gordon, the afternoon express run. Yes, sir. And Gordon, please make sure all the passengers exchange at Elsbridge. A magician will be getting off there to get to Maithwaite. Of course, sir.
Don't worry, Percy. I'm sure there's such thing as magic. But Percy wasn't so sure. A little while later, Percy was stopped at a red signal. James was further up the line, going in the opposite direction. When? Oh no!
Ew.
What?
Out of my way! Express coming through!
Oh no!
Look out!
What? Oh dear!
Phew. See, Gordon, we were right. That magician really is magic.
What do you mean?
That magician was on your train, and he changed the points just in time.
No, he didn't, Percy. There's a fine line between reality and magic.
But you said that the carpet flew because of magic.
That's different. Carpets don't fly, but points change. Points changing is not magic.
Percy was sad. He didn't know what to believe now. Percy's next job was delivering some trucks to Elsbridge. He left his trucks at the platform and puffed onto a siding out of the way. Just then, Toby arrived with the stone train.
Hello, Percy.
Hello, Toby. Toby, do you think magic is real?
What brought that up?
Well, when I told the other engines about the amazing tricks that the magician does, they only scoffed and said magic wasn't real.
Toby thought for a moment.
Well, I'm not an expert on the topic, but I know who can answer your question.
Who?
That magician, he'll know the answer. If you get the chance to talk to him, then you should ask.
And that's what Percy did. A few days later, Percy brought the magician for his afternoon performance. As the magician was walking on the platform, Percy spoke up.
Excuse me, sir, but, are you real?
Whatever do you mean? I'm standing here, aren't I?
Yes, but, well, what I mean is magic real?
Well, what do you think?
Well, I want to believe that magic is real, but the other engines don't, so...
So it's hard to believe in something you can't see, especially when others don't believe and you don't want to look silly.
Yes.
Well, a magician never reveals his secrets, but it doesn't say anything about engines. Do you see this coin?
Yes.
Well, now you don't.
What? How'd you do that?
It's not really gone. It's behind my hand, you see. What magic really is the illusion that leave your audience to tell the story. Magic is letting people see what you want them to see.
So, magic really isn't real?
That is a question that every individual and engine must decide for themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Magician. Magic really is real.
At the sheds, Percy performed a magic trick of his very own in front of the other engines.
engines were bewildered and surprised. Even Henry and James were wondering if magic was real or not. But Percy was the only one who knew the true secret to magic. It was the beginning of fall on the island of Sodor. Sir Topham Hatt was having many restoration projects done before the winter season. One of these was replacing a set of points on the main line that had been warped by the summer heat. The workmen worked hard, ripping up the old rails and putting a shiny new set in its place. The engines were very happy when the work was done. One night, Percy was delivering the mail. He was passing over the new points when... Whoa! One of Percy's mail cars derailed. Luckily, no one was hurt. In the morning, Percy arrived at Knapford to see Sir Topham Hatt. Good morning, sir.
Percy, the breakdown gang cannot determine what caused your derailment last night. They say it's most mysterious.
How strange.
But anyway, I need you and Rosie to collect a train of goods that has arrived at the yard and then bring it to Kildane.
Yes, sir.
Percy was quite puzzled.
How did my mail car derail? It couldn't have happened on its own. And what do they mean by mysterious?
Percy thought about this all the way to the yard. Once there, Percy couldn't find Rosie anywhere.
Rosie! Hello? Where is she?
Hello, Percy.
Oh, hello, James.
I heard about your accident last night. It must have been the ghost of the signal box that caused it.
Ghost? What ghost?
The ghost of the signal box. Back before you and I arrived on the island, there used to be an old signal box on that part of the line. The signalman that worked there was very kind and worked hard. Some say he worked too hard and never left. Others say that he lived in the signal box. Either way, he was there on the night of the disaster. There had been a strong storm the night before, and the ground was unstable. The signalman was in his box. He had to wait for the last goods train to pass through before heading home. As the long train reached, it whistled long and proud. The ground began to shake. And before anyone realized, it was too late.
What happened?
Well, the noise from the engine's whistle had caused a landslide. It crushed the signal box, leaving it in a pile of rubble.
What about the signalman?
They never found him. A new signal box was reconstructed in its place, and a new signalman was sent to work there. But when the signalman goes home and the lights are out, you can see a glowing figure moving around inside. Some say that it's the spirit of the signalman waiting for the last train.
There you are, Percy. Bad news. Our train has been delayed on the other railway. We can't deliver it till tonight.
Yes, why not?
Be careful, Percy. Ghosts always work night shifts.
It was night before the train arrived. Percy was dreadfully nervous as he and Rosie set off into the moonlit night. As they did so, Gordon thundered by with the express. This startled Percy.
Oh, look. Percy's spooked.
No, I'm not,
he said, trying not to sound scared, as the two neared the points.
Faster, Rosie, I don't want the ghost to catch us.
And Percy pulled hard on the couple.
Slow down, Pussy. There's no such thing as ghosts.
Percy didn't listen and pulled even harder.
Percy,
Be quiet! Snapped Percy as they rattled over the points. First, everything was going well. The next, Rosie was going one way while Percy and the trucks went the other.
Pussy!
The trucks saw this as an opportunity.
Stop! Stop!
Percy was on the most wild ride of his life. As he barreled down the line, the points began changing on their own, zigzagging him across the line. Until at last, his ride came to an end. It was morning before help arrived.
How did you get into this mess?
Percy didn't answer. He didn't know himself. That night, Sir Tom had arrived to see Percy.
Percy, you'll be pleased to know that it has been determined what's caused your accidents.
Was it a ghost, sir?
No, Percy. Whatever gave you that idea?
Oh, just a big red scarlet deceiver.
Nevertheless, Percy, the points were faulty and were moving on their own, causing your accidents. This problem will be taken care of. You won't have any problems with the points anymore.
Oh, thank you, sir.
And then Sir Topham Hatt left.
To think I believed there was such thing as the ghost of the signal box. Wherever did you come up with such a story like that, James?
I didn't make it up. Edward told me the story.
Percy's smile faded and was replaced with fear. He looked up at the moon as it disappeared behind the clouds. Percy then thought back to the nights before.
Maybe there was someone watching me the whole time.
It was a cold winter on the island of Sodor. Many ponds had been frozen over, so people came to go skating. A group of women also came. They would skid about over the ice so gracefully that it had memorized a certain pink tank engine.
I wish I could skate.
She told Percy one day.
Don't be silly. Water is nothing but a nuisance. It's cold and wet no matter what form it's in.
All the same, Rosie's dream of skating only grew. A freeze had come upon the island. The rails were slick. The trucks had taken advantage of this and had pushed Rosie all the way to Edward's station. Luckily, Rosie was able to get the trucks under control, but when she tried to start off again, she couldn't. Her brakes were jammed. Emily was sent to take Rosie's train, and Rosie sat cold and miserable at the platform when her driver approached her with two queer things in his hands.
What are those?
They're wheel skates. They lift damaged wheels off the rails so engines can move freely again. We're going to put them on you so another engine can move you to a siding.
As her driver began to put the skates on, Rosie continued to dream about skating.
Oh, I wish I could skate and perform tools.
Once Rosie's driver had finished, he went to go speak with the station master. As Rosie waited for her next instructions, James came sliding in out of control. He cried as he bumped into the back of Rosie, sending her off like a toboggan.
Help! Help!
Cried Rosie as she zipped down the line helplessly. Up ahead, a skating competition was underway. As Rosie skated down the line, she flew off the bin, crushed the fence, and skidded over the frozen pond, spun around, and smashed into a snowbank. Luckily, no one was hurt. Poor Rosie was embarrassed. Soon, Butch was on the scene.
Rosie, wheel skates are meant for the rails, not the ice.
Rosie said nothing and was taken away. As Rosie was still being repaired, Sir Tom had arrived to see her, accompanied by some strange people.
Rosie, these are skating officials from the skating competition. They have something special for you.
Rosie, we have never had an engine compete in our annual skating competition, so we are very proud to present you with this first place trophy. Congratulations!
Your twirls are so graceful.
Yes, very well done indeed.
Well, Rosie, despite an unfortunate turn of events, we can sometimes still end the day with something golden.
Rosie smiled.
I wished I could go skating, but I never thought I'd get first place.
One wintry morning, Edward was pulling the early morning local. He had just left Wellsworth and was passing through the beautiful countryside, which was covered in a fresh blanket of white. The island looked so beautiful with the morning sun hitting the snow.
It certainly does.
I always look forward to these morning trains during the winter. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy pulling morning trains during the other seasons. But
there's just something magical about seeing the railway covered in snow.
You know me too well, driver. Brakes, driver, please!
Thank goodness you warned us, Edward.
What's going on? And I was pouring my cocoa when my coach jerked.
Never you mind about your cocoa. We have bigger matters to attend to.
Yes, that snowdrift has covered the line and it's too thick to push through.
Can we just go for help?
Can't. The snow's too deep to walk through for help. We'll just have to reverse to Wellsworth carefully.
So Edward reversed slowly down the line. They had just rounded the bend when the driver stopped Edward. Then he and the fireman walked to the end of the train. What's happened? The driver then walked back and addressed Edward.
You won't believe this, old boy, but there's been another snowdrift and it's blocked the line behind us.
So, are you saying we're trapped?
I'm afraid so. The snowbank behind us isn't too deep, but we can't push through because the coach could get stuck.
So what are we going to do? We can't leave the passengers stranded in the snow.
The guard is getting ready to go for help.
It'll be a long, cold walk to Wellsworth.
I know, but we have no choice. We must help the passengers.
Edward did want to help the passengers, but he didn't want his guard to trudge through the snow. But then, an idea flew into his funnel. Driver, I have an idea!
What is it?
Hank told me that in America, some coaches at the end of their trains have plows built on the bottom.
So, how can that help us?
We can take my snowplow and put it on the back of my rear coach.
That's a brilliant idea, Edward.
So Edward's crew removed the plow and put it on the back of the brake coach. When everything was ready, Edward's driver gently started Edward. and slowly pushed through the snow.
Well done, boy, well done!
They puffed triumphantly back to Wellsworth. The passengers cheered. They thanked Edward's crew. But most of all, they thanked Edward, the Blue Engine. I never do it for the praise. I simply do it to get the passengers home. One morning, Percy was shunting empty trucks at Knapford. Gordon was also at the station. He simmered impatiently for Thomas to fetch him his coaches.
Hurry up, you. The express mustn't be late.
Thomas didn't like being bossed about, but he still remembered to shunt the coaches gently. Just then, a question seized in Percy's smokebox.
Gordon, why do you have your coaches brought to you?
I'm an important tender engine, and tender engines like me don't shunt.
Because their tenders make them too fat to move about in the yard.
I resent that, you little blue puffball.
I want to be important.
You can't be important. You've got no tender. Tenders are marks of distinction. That's what makes engines important.
Just then, the signal changed, and Percy popped crossly away. Along the way, Percy couldn't stop thinking about the tenders.
I'm a hard worker. I deserve a tender. Besides, what does Gordon know? He's just a bossy boiler, I think. But why can't I be important too? If tenders are what makes you important, then I want one too.
Percy had developed feelings for tenders, and one now more than ever. He would complain to the other engines, but they didn't take much notice.
We little engines don't get tenders. Silly little Percy, trying to be important.
This made Percy crosser still. One day, he was behind schedule to collect a stone delivery. To make matters worse, Mavis, who should have been there to help, had been called away. Now Percy had to marshal his train by himself. By the time everything was ready, Percy was very late indeed. To top it off, he had to pull his train backwards.
It's lucky you don't have a tender. It makes pulling trucks backwards easy.
Percy grumbled. He despised pulling trucks backwards. As Percy made his way down the line, he couldn't stop thinking about having his own tender. He was so focused that he passed right through a red signal. Further up the line, Molly was waiting at another red signal. Before anyone realized, it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the trucks were in a heap. Soon Harvey arrived with Rocky to clear the mess. As the workmen did, the other lines were left operational, with speed restrictions in place. Gordon was slunking past with his express when he overheard a workman.
I can't believe it. Percy's coupling is fastened to Molly's tender. It must have happened in the crash.
Percy hoped Gordon hadn't heard, but he had.
Well, little Percy, you certainly wanted a tender to make yourself important. But you can't steal someone else's tender, especially Molly's. It's simply not your color.
Gordon puffed away to tell the other engines, quite satisfied. As for Percy, he decided he didn't want to be important anymore.
especially if it makes you look like a fool. Sir Handel had never forgiven Gordon after the time he listened to his advice and pretended to be ill to avoid his work. Instead of the outcome he wanted, he received a stern talking and more work than he could ever ask for. It had been some time since then, but it had made him bitter. Because of this, he had been confined to the wharf until his behavior changed.
What's got you in a tizzy?
It's that Gordon and his advice that gets others in trouble, while he gets away scot-free.
What did he tell you to do?
He told me to pretend to be ill to get out of my work. It was nice until Peter Sam got into an accident.
He did the same to me, and shortly after, Thomas got into trouble. Sir Tom Hat found me out, and Gordon got away.
He's never learned that his advice is foolish.
Then maybe it's time he learned.
Then James whispered a plan to Sir Handel. They both chuckled at their trickery. Their chance came a few weeks later, when Gordon had been sent with a goods train to the wharf for Henry, who had taken ill. Gordon was not happy and felt his position deeply.
Pulling goods trains are simply beneath me, my dear Sir Handel. Being such a senior engine, I should only do the work most suitable.
Oh, indeed, Gordon.
But yet again, being a fine engine yourself knows the grievances we suffer.
Oh, yes, Gordon.
Hello all. Oh, Gordon, I have a message for you. There's a special waiting for you at Crovan's Gate.
Is it coaches or trucks?
Trucks?
One goods train is enough, but two in one day is unacceptable.
Yes. You know, Gordon, if you were ill, you couldn't take the train. Could you?
Yes, you're right.
Look! Here comes your crew now. Come along, Gordon. Show a will.
I don't feel well. Loose will, I believe.
Rubbish! You had no trouble coming here. But just to be safe, they looked him over. But of course, found nothing wrong. But his crew, knowing their engine all too well, decided to play along. You're right, Gordon. One of your wheels is loose.
Practically about to fall off. It's a miracle we got here in one piece.
Gordon was surprised. His trick worked. You poor engine. You're not fit to work. We must send for another engine at once. Gordon wanted to smile with triumph, but didn't dare. He simply let out a moan. When Gordon saw that his crew were out of sight, he smirked slyly.
Now that, my dear engine, is a perfect fisherman's tale.
Fisherman's tale? But your story was about being under the weather, not fish.
A fisherman's tale, dear engine, is a story where the details are exaggerated, made up, or stretched. Simply put, a lie.
Sir Handel didn't understand what fishing had to do with the matter, but as long as the plan worked, it was fine by him. A little while later, James arrived.
It's a true shame, isn't it, Gordon?
What is?
Poor Henry.
What about Henry?
Didn't you hear? Henry was the only one who could take the train you were meant to deliver. But he was so under the weather that he lost his bearings and had a terrible accident.
Poor engine, but it just goes to show that if you can't pull trucks, then you shouldn't pull them at all.
How can you be so empathetic, Gordon? Especially since Henry's being sent for scrap.
Scrap?
Indeed. Beyond repair from what I heard. Sir Tom Hat is coming here now. I expect he wants to talk to you.
Gordon was horrified. He didn't want to see Sir Tom Hat. He was so disoriented that he started off with a jerk, throwing his crew from the cab. A crate had been placed too close to the line, but there was nothing he could do as it was crushed under his wheels and threw him from the rails.
Whoa!
Luckily, no one was hurt, but Gordon was now tangled in a fishing net. His driver, still rubbing his tailbone, laughed.
Look, it's the catch of the day. A blue whale.
My, Gordon. You will have fishy tales to tell.
No, James, a fisherman's tale.
More like a fisherman's lie.
A familiar voice came.
Wow, I didn't know he was actually going to be here.
Please, sir, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean for Henry to be scrapped. Whatever are you talking about, scrapping Henry? I would never dream about such a thing. Whoever gave you that idea?
Gordon glared behind him, but Sir Handel and James had wisely puffed away.
I don't appreciate engines not pulling their weight on my railway, especially you, Gordon. An engine of your knowledge should know better than to pretend to be ill and telling others to do the same.
Gordon gulped. He now realized his mistake.
I hope this incident has taught you not to be so silly. Yes, sir. It has, sir.
As Gordon waited to be rescued, he sighed. He had fallen for a fisherman's tale and his own advice. He realized now to be more withholding of his wisdom, because he knows now it can come back to haunt him. Gordon's accident had left the express without an engine. Normally, Henry or James would take it in Gordon's absence. But Henry was still ill, and James was far too busy with his own work. Sir Tom Hatt was in his office, very forlorn, when his assistant came in.
Is there something troubling you, sir?
Indeed. Too many engines out of commission with none to spare for the express.
If I may, sir, why not borrow an engine from the mainland?
Why wouldn't he choose me? I'm capable of pulling the express.
Because you're the one who got me into this mess.
You had it coming.
Are you jealous of a little competition, Gordon?
You wouldn't be on his side if you heard what he said about you.
What did he say?
He said you were scrapped.
He what?
Said you were rotting in a scrapyard.
That's exactly where you artifacts belong.
Who said that?
The engines didn't have to wonder long. In front of them purred a long, dark red diesel. He looked very strong.
Who are you?
Revolution, old-timer. The new express engine. I've heard you engines give diesels a bad name. Bowler, spam cam, old stuck-up. All names I'm sure you're familiar with.
Of course. The names of diesels that came to our island. All stuck up and proud.
But they all failed, showing just how reliable we steam engines are.
I'll give you that. Those diesels that came before did fail, but I'm different. I'll succeed where others failed. I'll show just how efficient we diesels are, putting you relics in your place. You'll see that the one giving the names will be me, and that name is Scrap.
That's exactly what you are.
The diesel was just about to reply when Sir Topham had arrived.
Ah, 37702. I hope your journey here was a pleasant one. I see you've met my engines.
Yes, we have.
That's good.
For whom? Sir Tom Hatt stared at James, then returned his attention to the visitor.
I'm sure you will want to rest after your long journey. Please make yourself at home. You'll start work in the morning.
Yes, sir.
Sir Topham Hatt then turned to the big engines.
I know you each have mixed feelings on this arrangement, but I expect you all to keep it to yourself. I want you all to make our visitor welcome. I promise this is only temporary.
Yes, sir. That night, the engines were speaking about the new diesel. 37702, who wanted to sleep outside, listened intently.
intently. This new diesel has rather large shoes to fill.
Do you think he's fast?
He might be fast, but he'll never be faster than Gordon.
You mean break his speed record?
Exactly. No diesel is capable.
37702 overheard this. He thought deeply, then chuckled.
Yes,
He said,
I'll do it tomorrow.
every day, Gordon stops once at Brendam Docks with the Express. This is to collect passengers from large luxury cruise liners. Every wise express engine knows to remember this important stop. Gordon was explaining this to 37702, but the diesel paid him no mind, and could only think about beating Gordon's record.
Remember, the Express is a fast service, but no record breaking.
Why? Too afraid of your precious record being broken by a diesel?
My record? But you can't. That's for me to break.
Not anymore.
Soon 37702 was racing down the main line. His wheels pounded the rails as he pulled hard. He blew his horn rudely to everyone he passed. Soon it was time for the run to the docks. 37702 raced faster and faster down the line.
The record is mine. The record is mine.
Soon he reached the junction. The signalman changed 37702 onto the line to the docks.
The diesel didn't know why he had been changed onto the other line, but thought it was a shortcut, and went even faster. Slow down! There's no need to break the sound barrier!
There is then,
he said as he raced through the docks.
I'll show Sir Topham Hatt that diesel's in a more superior mode of transport.
The passengers at the quay watched as 37702 raced past. They shouted and waved, but a foolish 37702 thought they were cheering for him. The passengers were cross at being left behind. 37702 was just almost out of the docks when the coach's brakes slipped on. The train came to a groaning stop. 37702 was annoyed.
Why have we stopped?
But he didn't have to wait long. A furious passenger stormed out, shaking his fist angrily.
That was my stop!
The passengers swarmed around the train like angry bees, telling their crew just what they thought. The diesel felt very silly. 37702 was very late as he slipped silently into the station. He was too embarrassed to be seen, but Sir Topham Hatt was waiting for him.
I don't know how things are on the mainland, but we have speed limits here. My railway is not a racetrack and you're not a NASCAR. I don't allow speed demons on my railway. You have harassed my engines and made a laughingstock of my railway. I will not put up with such behavior. I'm sending you back to the mainland.
Well, 37702 didn't break Gordon's record after all.
But he certainly broke his pride.
37702 scowled. He was in disgrace. Gordon was soon back to pulling the express, and knows better now than to pretend to be ill. As for 37702, however, he was taking a train back to the mainland with him for Henry.
Well, look here. If it isn't the speed demon. Huh. That name suits you. Ha! Who's giving the names now?
37702 growled as he gritted his teeth. He said nothing as he crossly pulled away back to the mainland, away from expresses, steam engines, and speed records.
It's Thomas the Tank Engine, hip 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 hooray. Chugga chugga chug chug chuff chuff chuff, he rides along the way. And when you hear that whistle, it can only be one train. Our favorite little engine, Thomas is his name. Thomas the Tank Engine rolling along. All of his friends will be coming along. Thomas, we love you. He's a really useful engine with a heart that's big and strong. He chugga chugga chuff chuffs, working hard, helping everyone. Thomas, he has lots of friends and you can be one too. Just clap, clap, clap and sing along. Thomas, we love you. Alice and Bertie, Diesel, Duck and Daisy, lots more friends for you. He's always up to mischief, that cheeky little train. He chuffs everywhere, he's always playing games. The fat controller scolds him, but he loves him just the same. Our favorite little